Thank you, Arfa. Let's move on to our next invited speaker for this session, who is Dr. Aman Iqbal. Dr. Aman Iqbal is a science and technology entrepreneur. He is currently CEO of Incor Renoise Labs, a Hyderabad-based pharma company, working to make India self-sustained on chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Aman has a PhD in chemical biology and has built and invested in numerous healthcare-based startups and public-private partnerships around the world. His other focus, besides data in healthcare, is automation in the new energy space. We welcome you, Dr. Iqbal. Thank you for joining us today. You may share your screen now.
Can you see? Medha, can you
Yes,
hear and see?
yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great, fantastic. So I'll just begin into safe time. So, the mission and vision of all our works is really using science, technology, engineering, and design for what we all need is a clean and green future. And across the various things that the projects that are starting in health is whether it's trying to automate production using hardware engineering automation or human performance using saliva tracking. All of these projects really have data at the core of it, and how best we utilize it to only two things can happen in our in the industries we work in, is to make things more efficient, which is obviously always the need of the hour. It saves costs, it saves time, and a lot of human bandwidth which can be used for other things. And second things is, yes, you do get to your results quicker, and that can help in managing global supply chains, whether it's for medicines or for energy as well. So since today we're talking about AI in healthcare, for me, I sort of I talk more about data in healthcare, because health, as we all know, is a huge data problem. And I'll sort of be sharing my thoughts and views on a lot of it. Today's presentation won't include any of my detailed works, but sort of most of the portfolio companies and what their challenges are in the healthcare space. So, there are a lot of efforts. I'm sure, like I'm just sort of talking about it again, is a lot of efforts that are going on, whether it's virtual medicine or healthcare, which really picked up during the pandemic and was impactful to some extent. A lot of it is also now around a lot of really nice algorithms and machine learning systems being used for clinical data management. A lot of really, I mean, the space really has, I can see, evolved over the last decade in terms of the best use of algorithms and sort of crunching data, which comes in as in gigabytes, if not terabytes, from a lot of these clinical studies. I think one of the biggest successes of AI and data in general in healthcare, as we all know, has been in sort of pathology. Being able to read scans. Accuracy is still questionable for most of the technologies out there, but I think it's a limitation of what algorithms are using and the number of images or the input data they're using to train their neural nets. So, I think that limitation will be overcome, but I think it's a great breakthrough in medicine. Of course, AI is also being now used for a lot of supply chain work, especially post-COVID. How can we delivery more efficient? There's a lot of AI used in hospital now for managing hospital operations and sometimes in running certain systems. So I think the era of data and in healthcare, had arrived, and now we're sort of really have all the tools, is what I feel, to solve problems. And just like the Neanderthals back in those days, they had to sharpen their tools over a period of decades, if not hundreds of years. And I think that's the process we're in. And with all of you brilliant technologists in IIIT and otherwise, I think we have the best jobs, if I may say, in the current day of human evolution, because technology, how best we can refine it, write better algorithms, solve problems that are huge, like the protein folding problem, is really our strength, and the time is here for us. But I think one of the biggest problems, which I also spoke about, I guess, in one of my other talks at IIIT, was the challenge with data in healthcare, as we all know, is it sits in silos. In general, it's for every industry, but more so in healthcare, because you have clinical practices that are running independently. You have hospitals that are running independently. Hospital chains don't share data with each other. It's a very well-known fact, and reports are already out there. And then you have obviously all your academic research, the clinical research, and there are a lot of challenges around the source of data, how it's identified, how it's annotated, how clean is it. There are instruments involved in a lot of this data collection, as we all do. How well calibrated these instruments are. So we need to get a little more data precise, is what I'm trying to get to. And this silos problem is a major issue. So a lot of the data, this data is not a problem. There's a lot of data out there, especially the pathology AI companies can, go out and collect a lot of radiology data if they wanted to, put more funds into their outreach and data collection outreach line item. But the challenge is that a lot of this data is not standardized. So you cannot use global data, healthcare data, for anything. And if anybody's using it, I don't think it's the right way to use it. It's not standardized. It's not cleaned up. We don't know what instruments sometimes this is coming from. The nature of those studies, we all know. There are certain pressures. People end up publishing a little quicker. And more importantly, I think we talk about blockchain, but blockchain is not really cracked big in healthcare. And there's the portability issue is pretty big in healthcare data, but it stems more from the if as technology work on these data points and making best sense of it, making it, I think is the way forward. Make it clear, right? Is it okay?
Yeah, little bit of disturbance in between, but I think we are all good. All we are good. Yeah.
Okay, Paul. So I think there are really good works happening in where we're trying to use data to understand food better, or trying to solve a problem for rural healthcare. But at the core, if you look at any of our hospitals, not just here in India, anywhere in the world, data is still not being used for creating the streamlined experience. And whether it's from fully automated end-to-end data-driven, so I think what I was talking about was this perfect solution, if you may, for where your constant harnessing of data from biology to operations can create an ecosystem for care where things are streamlined. So this is a perfect vision where these siloed efforts that we're all engaged in for various things can come together. And the best example, or the best case study, really is a hospital of the future. And nothing of this sort truly exists. There are semi-automated operations. Clinical data is not standardized, right? So all of those things will be taken care of a single system model. Clear, right, Megha? You can hear?
Yes, sir.
So I think in terms of, like, if you start really from where the data is being collected, you have your single cell sequencing that's going on with a lot of data that gets generated from the genome, RNA sequencing. All these technologies are able to read a lot of this now, very specific data for cellular operations, functions, etc. And then most of the So in a summary, of course, there's a lot of effort that's going on to track the CNS using brain computing interfaces. That's an area which we always, from a point of view, think there is a lot of R&D going on around the world to interpret signals, and we use this to offer better care for CNS patients. There's obviously a lot of biomechanics data collection, which is, I'm seeing technologies that are coming out where biomechanic wearables are being used for physiotherapy and for rehabilitation. And as much as we take these things lightly, it's a major impediment on humans who go through life-threatening accidents. So I think the era of this is where I feel like data is playing a very important role, especially in designing these instruments, where now there's a feedback response from muscle twitching to chips, which can help in fix the problem over a period of time, versus making this into a qualitative process, which is what is right now, right? Physiotherapy. Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I think, it all comes down to, and I would always speak at a individual level, as also Dr. Ganesh said, that, we need to, when you talk about health, especially, you're looking at an individual level. So if you can somehow have a collection of these data points for each individual, you're able to truly track their journey from womb pretty much to their old age, and this becomes a new paradigm for healthcare. And the good news here is that all of these individual data collection for various operations in the entire health system is being done. So all that needs to happen really is, how do we read these metadata sets, find correlations, pattern recognitions, and be able to come up with solutions which can really create a unified, fully integrated system. It's a huge task. And of course, there are grants being awarded to groups across the world who are all trying to work in this space. But I think this is just a call out for using data in healthcare in the best possible way to create and solve the meta problem, which is of how healthcare is practiced. We all know, and it's whether it's NHS, whether it's the Indian system or any other system in the world, health is a big problem, and data really has that impact that it can play. Now, when you look at a smart care center, I think, these are all sort of currently under a lot of planning. So I'm just sharing a very top level view of, what a center of this sort could look like. So you have your biology, where, once you walk in, your thing is being recorded, and from, knowing, the doctor would know what your DNA is like, whether you're giving birth or you're going through a life-threatening treatment. Technology, where you got to have systems that give good data, can be analyzed, cleaned, structured, stored, and build a solid blockchain network so that hospitals can communicate not just between the chains, intra-hospital, or even globally. Right? I think that's where the blockchain impact will come into healthcare. In terms of medical procedures, of course, there's a lot of innovation going on for robots, and we're seeing a lot of great strides there with the introduction of keyhole surgery, which I think is a fantastic invention. Considering how things were done just 2-3 decades back, maybe not even that. So I think, when you combine it then to the operations, where I think a lot of the things really slow down, I think data should not only be looked at from a bio point of view. We should look at data in operations all the time, and everybody's looking at it in other industries. But how can we use in-hospital data, whether it's admission, outpatient, billing, overall patient post-surgery or post-treatment monitoring? All of that can be done, handled, automated, streamlined through writing of various really good algorithms. A lot of our portfolio companies are already doing it. And I think there will be a near time where I think can all look at, healthcare data being used in the best way possible, because I think the challenges, which I'll just again talk about on this slide before I stop, is data tagging, cleansing, storage. How do we forecast diseases from this data sets, whether it's coming from, how do we handle all that data to be able to forecast what may happen, whether it's seasonal diseases or so on. And we continue to need to look for data storage technologies as well, whether we use carbon nanotubes or DNA. So I think there is a big hope for future for young technologists, scientists like you guys, and all of us to come up with better solutions and use data and AI in the best way for healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Iqbal, for sharing your expertise in the field and shedding lights on the various aspects, such as things you are doing with pathology, healthcare, and supply chains. We would like to thank you for joining us today. Now I request the participants to ask their questions. We are open for discussion now. I'll try to read out some of the questions from the chat box. So Ayush has asked a question: while incorporating artificial intelligence systems in the healthcare sector, did you face any problem with convincing the healthcare workers that a given system is for the best? If yes, how did you tackle it?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Ayush. So I think, the challenge which everybody will face is in a already built up place which is running in a certain way. When you're trying to change one aspect of it or one component, it has effects on everything else. So there is always pushback for that because things don't integrate. So it's a very good point, and a lot of actually startups that I've spoken to have always faced these challenges of incorporating new technology, which is why I when I look at the whole problem, it has to be done from ground up. Like you have a fully integrated system, because bringing technology in the current systems, whether it's Indian hospital healthcare or it's any other country, I think the integration adoption will always be a challenge.
Anyone else has any questions, they can type it in the chat box. Okay, so one more question. Do you think it will be better to have a human in the loop?
No, when I say automating all operation doesn't mean you're automating doctors. I think this is just my personal view. Doctors are the best care providers. If they had all their time, they could just touch the patient's hand and treat them with just that touch. And all of the planning, all of the what treatment should be given can be automated. That's the best vision. You cannot take doctors out because the touch and care in healthcare is very important. Yes. But what doctors go through, right? I don't know how many doctors here. It's a lot of work for them. It's handling all the patients, a lot of planning. There's a lot of admin stuff and a lot of hospital administration stuff. So a lot of the core expertise, I think, sometimes gets a little lost. So I think the whole narrative for automation is in the benefit of the doctors only.
I think.
Yeah, Meta, can I interrupt for a moment?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think we lost Arjun. He also had connectivity issues. So on behalf of Arjun, I would also like to formally thank you, Dr. Aman, for accepting our invite. I know you're very busy. And I would like to bring up a question on students' behalf, which they normally ask, but sometimes in this platform, it doesn't come out so frequently as it should, that a lot of students, they get trained in machine learning and AI, but after that training, when they actually are looking for jobs in industries, they often feel disappointment. So in spite of all the training that they receive in academia, there is some gap that needs to be bridged somehow. So always their dilemma is that what industry is looking for. Since you have been in academia, you have a PhD degree, and now you have been into industry space, I think you will be perfect to answer that type of question, that how do students make that transition from academia to industry smoother than how it is right now?
That's a great question, Rita. So, I would say that it's solving the industry problems. So if there is a way for triple ITs to organize hackathons with the industry, see, my own company has constant data problems. Luckily, I have an in-house team now that we'd look to, solve. But I think anyone who's sort of finishing fourth year BTech, Masters, MTech, PhD, whatever it is, and has interest in the industry, best is to reach out somehow and help them as data scientists to solve any of their problems. Believe me, they'll always come up with something or the other. So once that happens, you get an
Thank you, sir, for answering the questions. Since Dr. Ray and sir are close friends, would you like to say a few words about Dr. Iqbal? Is Arjun sir here?
No, I think he's not here.
Oh, okay.
So we will have to thank Aman on behalf of our team as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. So now it's time for a break. Let's rejoin at 4 p.m. for the next session, which is on impact of AI on disease diagnostics and drug development.